United States, there is not a single state where a person can work 40 hours per week on minimum wage and afford a two-person apartment. Raising the minimum wage could eliminate financial insecurity for nearly 80 million minimum wage workers. The cost of living, including food, shelter, and utilities, has increased dramatically in the past 50 years. The current minimum wage of $7.25 per hour has not increased since 2009. Adjusted for inflation, this would equate to someone making $10.90 per hour in 2025. While this is better, this is not a living wage. It is predicted that in order to make a living salary with all of your basic needs met by a single individual, a person would have to make around $25 per hour, more than triple the minimum wage. The purchasing power of minimum wage peaked in the late 1960s, when it was possible to support a family of three on a 40-hour work week on minimum wage. But today, minimum wage does not even cover the price of rent. Raising the minimum wage and eliminating some minimum wages for tipped workers and workers with disabilities would have massive effects in the reduction of poverty and improvement in quality of life. The minimum wage was first established in 1938 to prevent companies from taking advantage of their employees with low wages. The first minimum wage was set at 25 cents per hour, which is only about $6 per hour adjusted for inflation. While this is lower than the minimum wage today, the price of housing and expenses was comparatively much lower in 1938. A person making 25 cents per hour would make around $1,000 per year. The average price of a house in 1938 was $3,900. This means that the cost of a house was about 4 times the yearly income of a person making minimum wage. Today, the average house costs $412,000. A person making $7.25 per hour today would have to spend almost 27 years' salary to buy an average house. This shows how, even though adjusted for inflation, the minimum wage is similar today to what it was in 1938, the buying power of that amount of money has decreased significantly, and the prices of necessities like shelter and food have become much more expensive. To be in the same financial situation when buying a house today as a person making minimum wage in 1938, you'd have to earn $100,000 per year. This shows how the minimum wage was a livable wage when it was first established because it was a sufficient amount of money to afford food, shelter, and other basic necessities. Increasing the minimum wage would have positive effects that are passed directly to the children of low-wage workers. About 30% of minimum wage workers are providing for one or more children. These children are likely deprived of experiences and resources that contribute to their development. A parent making minimum wage is likely receiving other government benefits that will help the child. These benefits will go towards specific things like food or education. The effects on the child can start even before birth. Low birth weight is more common in low-income mothers and is attributed to poor long-term health outcomes. An increased minimum wage would allow low-income mothers to be able to eat higher quality food and live in better conditions. This would increase the child's chance of having a healthy birth weight and having better health outcomes. Another factor that impacts the health of children is the stress of the parents. High amounts of cortisol during the gestation and birth of a child can cause a child to be more likely to have ADHD and need to use antidepressants in the future. Raising the minimum wage and removing some minimum wage exceptions for jobs will contribute greatly to closing the wage gap between white and minority workers. Minorities disproportionately work some minimum wage positions more than white workers. These are often jobs that rely heavily on customer tips rather than salary. Raising the minimum wage and removing the exemption for tip positions would greatly supplement the income they already make from tips and add security to their income. Not only are black workers more likely to live in states with low minimum wage, they are also affected more by changes in the minimum wage. A study found that increasing the minimum wage increased the income of black workers by 38.1%, while it only increased the income of white workers by 23.2%. This is because black workers are more likely to work jobs that pay minimum wage. Only about 1.5% of minority workers make less than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour, but around 47% earn at or below $15 per hour. An increase in the federal minimum wage would drive up the pay of low-wage workers who earn above the minimum wage. Black men earn on average 75% of what white men make per year. Raising the minimum wage would reduce the income race gap. This shows that raising the minimum wage not only reduces poverty, but also reduces the long-standing inequality in our society. This minimum wage increase would also have to increase each year, matching inflation to maintain its poverty-reducing benefits. In the past, the terms minimum wage and living wage were more synonymous than they are today. Minimum wage was established as a way to ensure that everyone could earn a living wage. A living wage is defined by a wage that can support food, shelter, and other necessities. Today, the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour is not a living wage. If a person earning the minimum wage of $7.25 per hour worked 40 hours per week for the entire year with no days off, they would earn just over $15,000. This falls below the federal poverty line. It is not good enough for a minimum wage to be increased to raise people just above the poverty line. This would not significantly increase their quality of life, because people just above the federal poverty line would still struggle to afford even basic necessities. A greater increase in the minimum wage to make it a livable wage is necessary to see poverty-reducing effects. Minimum wage is an effective tool for boosting worker morale and increasing retention for jobs. Being paid only $7.25 an hour can make people feel like their work is not valuable, when in reality many of those positions are vital for society to function. Economists have linked better mental health and productivity directly with higher wages. Another study found that increasing the minimum wage significantly reduced turnover costs. This means that with a higher minimum wage, there is a lower chance of people leaving job positions after a short time. This is likely due to increased worker satisfaction that comes with higher wages. A study that spanned from 2012 to 2015 measured the productivity of individual workers. They accomplished this by comparing different cities that have different minimum wage laws. This study found that the workers in higher minimum wage cities had higher attachment to their jobs. They also found that the cities with higher minimum wage have about a 4.5% boost in productivity. This may seem like a small boost in productivity, but company-wide, this is a massive increase. On average, retail employees spend about 8% of their total costs on employing minimum wage employees. So a 4.5% boost in productivity is well worth increasing pay. This shows how an increase is not just beneficial to workers, but it can also provide benefits to the company itself. Companies are starting to realize this, with 80% of business executives supporting significant increases to the minimum wage. Some people may argue that raising the minimum wage is not an effective poverty relief method because it does not assist the elderly, disabled, or children. While this is true that raising the minimum wage would primarily help working adults, it would also have effects that help them indirectly. Raising the minimum wage would put more money into the hands of low-income individuals. This would likely reduce the need for some other anti-poverty relief programs. The money saved from these programs could be put back into programs for people that the increased minimum wage does not help. Some people may also argue that increasing the minimum wage will increase prices. While from an economist's point of view this makes sense, the effects of minimum wage increases on prices are far smaller than the benefits given to those in need. Most studies show that there is only a modest increase in prices even after significant increases to the minimum wage. People also argue that many people who struggle to afford basic necessities should not be considered to be in poverty because of the modern amenities that they own. A study from 2005 found that 97.7% of poor households had a television, and 54.4% of families had a cell phone, which is likely much higher today. In the past, things like a TV or phone were considered luxuries, but today they are things you really cannot live without. Many jobs and daily tasks rely on phone apps or communication, and low-end TVs can be acquired for very cheap. Assuming that people are not struggling because they have modern everyday items is not an effective way to determine if someone is in poverty. Minimum wage is the most effective poverty relief tool. Raising the minimum wage is the most practically effective and politically feasible method to reduce poverty. Federal minimum wage increases directly benefit the most vulnerable and needy populations. Gaining support for an increase to the minimum wage would not be as difficult as implementing other programs if companies realize how they would benefit from increased worker productivity and decreased job turnover. Increasing the minimum wage is the best program for balancing poverty relief and boosting the economy.